what status you think that person is in their life at that moment when they turn 18. Where do you think they are in their life, as far as, how they're making a living, how they're surviving, the probabilities of them having undergone some kind of serious sexual abuse, which they had been. Many of them at that point are addicts, drug addicts, and they continue on into this trafficking scheme. But when we see them in public, or we see them on these commercial websites, we are treating them as though they're prostitutes from that moment on, that they're doing this willingly of their own accord. But the truth is that that choice and that decision was taken away from them a long time ago when they were children, and that's the reality. So one of the myths and misconceptions that I run into frequently is, especially within law enforcement, is they say, this is somebody who's doing this willingly. They made the choice to do this. And then there's all these different terms that we hear people refer to them as crackheads or whores, things like this. And that's the mindset that a lot of people have towards these women that are involved in what looks like on its face is prostitution, that this is some lifestyle that they actually elected to go into, when that's a lie. It's not true at all. So legally, the term sex trafficking means the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, advertising, obtaining, patronizing, or soliciting of a person for commercial sex. So in other words, if you recruit someone into it, if you house them knowing they're involved in it, if you drive them knowing that they're going to be involved in commercial sex, if you advertise them for that, or if you actually patronize them, if you obtain them for that purpose, you are guilty of sex trafficking. Now, if the person is under the age of 18, as I said, that's automatic. And by the way, you don't have to have knowledge of age. But when that person turns 18, you have to have that additional element of force, fraud, or coercion. The term labor trafficking, it basically is the same thing as sex trafficking. Sex trafficking is really a form of labor trafficking, but using someone to force them to provide labor or services through that force and fraud or coercion that I talked about. Now, you're looking at this picture here and you're wondering, Frank, what does this have to do with anything? So let me set this up for you. A lot of times when I go to these other offices and I speak with law enforcement and prosecution staff, and they say, well, Frank, we know that sex trafficking is out there, but we don't see it. We don't think it's we don't think it's occurring in our community. So one of the most frequent things I do and the easiest things I do is I just go to one of the commercial sites that are supposedly for escort services. And that's what I did in this instance. I went in Mobile, Alabama, just went there right there on my phone, and anybody can access these sites. They're publicly available. And I pulled up this picture of this young girl, and I think it's pretty clear to you that this girl is not involved in providing escort services. And you look at the phone number that you have to call for her, and you can have her delivered to you, or you can travel to a location where she'll give you an address, a hotel probably, where you can go and meet her. Now, these advertisements, this one is from 2018. These advertisements have gotten extremely explicit. So this was a few years ago, and I would say that the advertisements that I've seen here recently are far, far, far more graphic than what you're looking at here. So if you go to some of these advertising sites now, they're gonna flat out tell you what sex act they're going to perform and how much they're going to charge for it, and graphic detail, and they'll send you pictures to show that they're the real deal. If you look at this phone number, see, I was in Mobile, Alabama when I brought this up, and I looked at this number here. This same number and this same picture you can find in Orlando at that time, or Jacksonville, or Atlanta. So what is that telling you? So this same advertisement in Mobile, same girl, is being advertised in Atlanta, in Jacksonville, Orlando, all these various locations. So if you call that number, do you think you're really going to get that girl? And the answer is no, you're not going to get that girl. And you can also see from this that I regularly leave my cell phone way underpowered at 9%. So that's not a good thing to do. Yes, Doc.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to just kind of mention, and I do apologize for all of our viewers on YouTube. We had some technical issues getting started, but not to worry. We're good to go now, and I will at some point toward the end kind of redo my introduction that everybody missed about you, because I want to brag on you. But one of the things that you're bringing up here is something really valuable, in that, you know, when I go and I steal a car and I turn around and sell that to somebody else, I sell it once. Sex trafficking, I steal a human and I can keep on selling over and over again. Isn't that true?
Yes, very, very true. Sad but true. And that's until they actually expire, because the sad truth is that the life cycle for these victims is not very long. And it ends badly, and it only ends up in one place. And very seldom do these victims ever recover from what they go through here. Very seldom. I call those, the victims that do recover, I call those diamonds, because a diamond is something that's forged in the earth under extreme pressure from coal, and when it comes out, it's something beautiful and valuable. And that's what those diamonds are. I do know I'd say I know 3 women that survived this, and that today are actually taking a stand and trying to support more of these victims. But yes, so you can have one of these victims. I've had victims say that she was with 50 men in one day. So that's the lifestyle of trafficking victim. So these are just a few of the cases that I've done. This in the mid 2015, 2016. And when I first started doing these cases, I really didn't have a very solid background in human trafficking at all. And I had a lot of the same misconceptions, and I had fallen prey to a lot of the same myths myself about it. When I started realizing, the scope of this and the reality and the truth of it, I was shocked. If you see the picture here in the upper right, that is a 14-year-old girl that's standing on an air conditioner at a local hotel here. That was one of the ads that was being posted for her, for this little girl, by her trafficker. And this is a list of some of the cases that I have done. So those are all here in the Northern District. And again, these are my cases, but I've assisted with quite a few other cases here in Florida and other states as well. So now I want to talk a little bit more about organized crime and sex trafficking. So normally, traditionally, I think more before, when the internet was being used so prevalently, we had so much technology, but sex trafficking was kind of a small scale operation. But now what's happened is that it's kind of the business model has been adopted by some of these organized criminal groups because it is so profitable. And it's actually, now that's becoming the norm. So there's a lot of studies that have been done on this, seeing the absorption of sex trafficking into organized crime. And we're seeing a lot more of our cases with that organized crime connection. So, why organized crime, and how do they get involved? Well, they're actively involved in the recruitment. They provide security. They give an organizational structure to their business. They have to have advertising. They set up a pricing structure with a payment plan. And then, of course, they have to manage all of their funds and their monies. Now, think about this. If you are an organized criminal and you're part of a, let's say, a gang, and you're involved in sex trafficking, so you are selling your, and I hate to describe it this way, but your product in a certain area, and then another gang decides that they want to market and sell their product in your area, what do you think is going to happen there? So you're just going to have this conflict, right? Where you're providing the same product that I'm providing. So you're going to do all that you can to kind of curtail my business, and I'm going to do all that I can to curtail your business. And that often turns into violence. And the violence is not just with the gangs, but against the product, that is the victims, because they're the ones who are out there in the front. They're the ones who are most exposed to the public. So what you have is one gang will call up, a gang member will call up another trafficker's victim, and then they'll harm her, or they will threaten her. So what that does is it forces the trafficking victims to go and work for gangs in order to keep themselves safe when they're involved in this sex trafficking business. So yes, there are persons who independently are marketing themselves in what we would traditionally call prostitution. But they don't last very long, because if they're actually doing that, they're competing against these gangs who are controlling their victims. And so what do you think is going to happen to that independent woman who's out there engaged in, like, as I said, prostitution? It's not going to go well for her. So she's going to have to combine with one of these gangs in their operation if she wants to survive this. And that's what's going on. So we have a lot of women who are being threatened and coerced into joining the gangs and working for the gang members, just out of absolute fear for their own safety. And a lot of the victims are, as I mentioned before, they're drug addicts. And some of the traffickers are actually, when they recruit these young girls, they start providing them with narcotics and addict them, knowing that that's the way they're going to continue to maintain control of them later, because the trafficker then becomes their dealer. So if the victim wants to satisfy her addiction, she's going to have to go to her trafficker to get the drugs that she needs. And do you think he's going to give her a good deal? No, it doesn't work that way. What happens is she's going to go heavily into debt for him. And basically, she's going to be working for him for free to satisfy a debt that she's never going to satisfy. And that's just becomes just a way of life for them. But looking at this from a criminal investigation standpoint, these 6 elements that I've got here, this recruitment, operation security, organizational structure, advertising, these are all weak elements in approaching the investigation. If you can approach this as targeting their recruitment efforts, looking for their operational security, you can determine their organizational structure, you can see their advertising, because they got to pay for that advertising, right? So you're going to find all these connections, and you can use all of these elements here as weaknesses in their organization for you to target as you put together your case against them. So where are the crime groups operating? I'll get into that as soon as you continue there. Go ahead.
Yeah, Frank. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So if you go back to the recruitment piece, I just I had a quick question about that. So here's the question. Do you think, and this is from a maybe more criminological, sociological perspective, do you think that it is easier to recruit folks who are motivated by income, motivated by maybe popularity, maybe motivated by wanting celebrity status. I want to be a model, for example, or I have a drug addiction. Right. So these are all different motivators that make recruitment easier. Do you find that to be the case for the cases that you've investigated?
Yes. So on the recruitment side, what the recruiters, one of the common ways of recruiting is they have these young men that are actively out pursuing younger girls. Now the young man is trying to bring them into a relationship with him. So he will target girls who are vulnerable and emotionally vulnerable. They have family issues, things of that nature, and he will lure them into a relationship with him, and that will develop into his essentially controlling her through that relationship. So he'll bring her into this great party lifestyle. Well, he will take her out at night, and they will go dancing and clubbing and go to concerts and things, and he'll slowly bring her into drinking and then drugs as well. And that's the technique that they use to draw in the girls. And then when he's got her to a point where he can pass her off to the trafficker, he will just walk away from her after he's transitioned her over to the trafficker, and he'll go out and target more girls. And so he'll continue to do this process over and over and over again. He's recruiting these girls through this basically like a Casanova, bringing them into a relationship with him, bringing in and then swapping them over and giving them to the trafficker, and then continuing to go out and recruit more girls. And it's a very successful technique. And he'll be paid every time he does that for bringing another victim into this business. And now that's the younger girls. The older girls, or the young women, are the ones that are vulnerable, are, as you pointed out already, are the ones who probably already addicted. I had a case where I had a victim that was actually a former military police officer and became addicted to opioids, and was so desperate to satisfy her addiction that she got drawn into this. She was literally kidnapped and abducted, and by a trafficker, and he exploited her weakness, the weakness of addiction, which many people don't understand the power of addiction and how controlling that can be. I hope I answered your question there, Doc.
Yes, Frank, exactly. And that's why sometimes what happens is we blame the victim, and they are victims. They're not criminals here, right? So oftentimes sex workers may be viewed as criminal when in fact they're victims, either victims of environment, victims of addiction, mental illness, whatever it might be. Thanks. I don't mean to interrupt you. Keep going.
Not a problem. This can get pretty complicated because a lot of times, especially with the younger victims, you do not call them a victim. They don't appreciate that. They want to say, no, I chose this. This is what I want to do. These are all my decisions. I'm responsible for what I'm doing. And they completely buy into that, and not understanding that they really are victims. So sometimes I use the term survivor when I talk to them, but most often I don't use any of those terms at all, because they're very sensitive to that. So when we talk about, where is this happening? It's happening all around us. Prime locations are the strip clubs. We have street prostitution. We have escort services, which are completely out of control. We have massage parlors, same problem. Brothels and internet prostitution is more prevalent than it has ever been. So these acts are occurring at hotels, and in the hospitality industry, in agriculture, of course, for labor trafficking. But we also have sex trafficking there. And then, of course, we have domestic servitude. Okay, y'all take a look at these pictures, please. Now, these are photos from actual cases. So, and this is irrefutable proof of the connection between gangs and human trafficking. So if you look in the top left there, you see a man, he's a trafficker, convicted, but he's got a post in his Facebook account. And if you look at his hands and look at the bandana he has over his face there, that red bandana, so that he's shooting a Crip gang sign. Then look to the right, upper right, and you see the young lady there. And it's got a caption on her post there. It says, "Bossed up." And she's got a black bandana in her teeth. Right? So she is a gangster disciple victim. If you look down to the bottom left, see the girl's left hand up towards her chest there, what looks like a pitchfork, and the symbol she's making, that's a gangster disciple sign in front of the black bandana on her ad. And if you look at the young lady to the bottom right there, what you see similarity in her hand and that of the other young lady there to her left. She's shooting a pitchfork too with her hand. She actually has a tattoo on her that says Queen, because she's a gangster disciple queen. And I'm sorry to tell you, but she is dead. She did not survive this. She was one of the trafficking victims in a case that we had here. Very intelligent young lady, very smart young lady, gone. Look at some of these other hand signs. See, you've got these bandanas, the clothing, the signs, this guy holding a gun, very organized. Gangster disciple GD 74 till the world blow. And again, these hand signs up here. So we see these all in these cases, in these investigations. And I'm not just picking on the Crips and or the GDs. All the gangs are involved in this. From the Aryan Brotherhood, I can't think of one that's not. See the tattoos, these marks that are on the victims? You see these markings on these young women and these children. Here's the 7-4 till the world blow. Here's the disciple queen, and then there's the Star of David. So they're branding these women. That just establishes that they belong to this gang. Look here. This guy on the far right here was convicted trafficking a 14-year-old girl. His nickname is Cash. So he posts this. A lot of money get made in this Saturn boy. We'd be road running, cash out. But look at their hands. So this shows that their connection with the gang. And he's posting that to tell other people that this is his gang. This is who he's affiliated with. There's nothing being hidden about any of this. So anything you want to know about these gangs, they're out there publishing it. You can go to their websites, you can go to their YouTube information. It tells you everything about their gang. It tells you the history of the gang. It tells you how to become a member of the gang. It tells you how to do these hand signs. It tells you the clothing to wear, everything, every aspect of the gang, because they are recruiting members for their gang. So it's in their best interest to publish all this information, to get all this information out there so that it can draw in more and more and more members. One resource that's available to us is prison records. So when someone enters the prison system, they're asked, are you a gang member? Are you an affiliate? Do you have gang-related tattoos? Because if you have these markings and tattoos, you don't want to be put in the wrong part of the prison. You don't want to be put with another gang, because it's going to be life-threatening for you. And they don't want violence occurring in their Department of Corrections, right? So they're going to make sure that you get put with people who are associated or affiliated with the gang that you're already a member of. So this is a great resource to us, because we just when someone's out of prison, we can determine which gang are they associated or affiliated with, because they told us. Here's a case, and this is just showing how to use social networking. So when we have these traffickers and they have these various victims, and they all have their own little internet accounts, they're all going to be talking to each other using the social networking sites. And all that information is readily available to us in law enforcement. So we can see who is friends with who and how often they're communicating and what kind of information that they're sharing. By the way, when they communicate, they usually have a language that they use. It's really tough to understand and decipher. And typically what we do is we use somebody, one of the victims who's cooperating, and help us understand what exactly is being said here or being expressed. But sometimes we just don't know, and we just don't understand it. But this is a great tool when you're doing an investigation. Talking about technology, so we know the traffickers, they have to use cell phones, laptops, whatever, in order to communicate with the market, and as well as with each other. So these are basically, these are images that were taken from this trafficker's phone. This is him right here. He got out of prison within just a couple weeks. He was right back in the trafficking again. And so this middle picture, I had to cut it off here, but this is one of the girls that he was selling online. And so I can say, exactly when he took this picture with his phone. Many times I can say exactly where he was. And then I can show him posting the money that he made off of her in one night. That's right from his cell phone. So that's powerful evidence, powerful. This guy was convicted and got 27 years. We can look at their texts. Look here. That's pretty explicit, y'all. He can't deny that he's not involved in prostitution at the least. So then we show that he's making money off of her and using force, fraud, and coercion. That's a great sex trafficking case right there. Hey, I talked to y'all about insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and always getting the same result. What we've been doing is kind of insane, because we becoming that. Oh, I spelled again wrong. It's not again, even though I'm from the South. We've been doing the same thing over and over again as we approach sex trafficking, and we're getting the same results. We're not making any headway. In fact, the problem really is getting worse. So the truth is, if people stopped buying sex, there would be no sex trafficking. It would disappear overnight. So we're doing very little about that. And you know what? That's an issue with men buying sex. If men would stop buying sex, there would be no sex trafficking.
Fabulous, fabulous, fabulous presentation, Frank. Thank you. So rich with valuable information. And I know that a lot of our viewers, those who are on the webinar and maybe even those who are watching us on YouTube, have a lot of questions. We have like 32 viewers right now on YouTube, and we have 45 total participants here in the webinar. I want to give the people who are here in the webinar an opportunity first to ask any questions they might have, statements, thoughts, doubts, issues, anything at all. Now's your chance to raise your hand, and I will then engage the microphone. And just to alert everybody, we do have a production team that works behind the scenes, and so we will not tolerate any harassment of any kind or anything that is obscene of any kind in this webinar or on this YouTube channel. So just that word of caution to those of you who are going to raise your hand now. And we have Meredith Spencer. Go for it.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. So my question is, this being such a sensitive subject as it is, how would you guys recommend that we teach younger generations about this? Like as in like children, because how do you really talk to a kid about this? Like warnings, like risks and, you know.
That's a great question.
That's a great question. And I want you to know that that's probably one of my biggest priorities today. I have 7 children, and I'm concerned about their safety. I actually go to their schools and I give presentations and I touch on these subjects. And you know what? The most important thing is with children is to communicate with them, to
Right.
talk to them about this, because if we are not talking with them about this subject, somebody else is. So when parents ask me, what's the most important thing I can do to ensure that my child is being safe? Talk to them. Make sure that that child has an adult, either a parent or someone that's very, very well trusted by a parent, that they can talk to about these kinds of matters and issues. Because if they don't, they are talking with somebody else about it, whether it's another child or one of these predators or recruiter or whomever. So that's the most important thing. Whenever I give my presentations with children, one thing I always do is you've got to be truthful with them, and you've got to get right to the point and be honest with them about these matters. And you can't present these little canned presentations or briefs or whatever, because they're not going to listen. They're going to shut that off. But they want to hear from you. And why is this important? What, how could this happen? I like to use examples of situations that occurred in our very own community. Then I say, hey, see what happened here to this young girl. Now, how do you think that happened? And then talk them through it. And then talk about where the bad decisions were made to help them avoid those same problems. If you are looking for material to talk about, there's online free programs on what's called NetSmarts with a Z at the end, NetSmarts. You can go there and they have presentations. By the way, you paid for them. And you can go there and you can watch through those. As I said, a lot of it is canned, but there's some great videos in there where kids are actually talking in the videos and explaining what happened and where they made mistakes and the bad decisions that they made. So those are some good resources there on NetSmarts. Highly recommend that to you.
Great.
Thank you. That was very insightful.
Thank you. Anybody else? Hands up. Anybody? How about Alex? Alex Suarez?
Hey, Frank,
Joey.
how you doing?
Great.
Hey, Alex.
Oh, this is Joey. This is actually Joey and Alex. So we could put them both on. That's great. And they see that they're in they're in this really great, illustrious office. How wonderful. Joey, let's start with you. Joey is not a criminal justice major, but Joey is project manager for the community, sociodrama community initiative. So go ahead, Joey. What's your question?
Well, first, I just want to thank you, Frank, for coming on tonight. This presentation was very insightful. I've learned so much. First thing I want to comment on is I like how you said that the ultimate problem is people buying sex. It's not the people engaging in it. If people didn't buy sex, there would be no sex trafficking. So I think that was a really important point you made, and I like that. And my question, though, is I have a really sort of random question. I used to live in Tampa for 2 years, and during that time, there was we had the Super Bowl, and I heard that the Super Bowl is the #1 trafficked event in the U.S. So I was just wondering, do you know anything about that? Can you speak to that? Have you heard anything about that?
Yes, I have. And it is a serious problem. Whenever you have these large gatherings of men and they're staying at these hotels, they're away from home. So there's this opportunity. And so, as I mentioned before, that this is this business, and the business model is targeting the market with this product. And so the traffickers will go to these locations and they'll take these victims with them, and they'll actively promote and try to engage these men to purchase their product. And again, I hate referring to these victims as products, but that's really what's going on here. And that's really what's happening. So it's not just at the Super Bowl, but it's happening large concerts, any gatherings where you have large groups, especially of men. The traffickers are going to target that group, that marketing group. And the traffickers are very clever. They work, they actually share victims, they trade victims, they'll borrow victims. You can have victims from one area of the country that are moved across the country because they know there's some big event that's going to take place, and they'll loan them to another trafficker, and he will in turn pay the other trafficker for loaning him or leasing him these victims. I mean, that's how well coordinated this all is.
Thanks, Joey. That was a great comment. Great question. Alex?
Hey, Frank, how you doing?
Hey, good evening, Alex.
Good evening. So I had first like kind of two questions. First one is a little bit similar to the one that our first guest asked, which was, I feel like in terms of like human trafficking and things like this, let me try to rephrase my question and think about it. A lot of the solutions that go into the people involved are usually in the criminal justice department, like cops, detectives, things like that. But what can we do as, average, ordinary day citizens to either raise more awareness of this or try like anything that we can do to decrease this from happening or making it become less common? What's like one thing we could do just to slow this down?
Well, there's a lot that can be done, and I say this is like trying to kill the Hydra from mythology, where this Hydra has all these heads, right? And so I think Hercules was trying to kill it, and he cut off a head, and when he did, it sprouted two more heads. So that's really what sex trafficking is like. It's got the multi-headed Hydra, but if we all swing together and swing our swords at the same time and cut up all these heads, we really can do something to kill this damn thing, this dragon that's been with us for so very long. But absent that, we're going to fail. So your point is, what outside of the scope of criminal justice and prosecution and investigation can we do? First off, those things need to get done. And a priority needs to be on the education and awareness side. So I'm not sure where you are in the state of Florida, but I do know this: everywhere in the whole state, there is now a human trafficking task force. It's been mandated by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement that every region in Florida have a human trafficking task force. I know I'm a part of two task forces up here. So wherever you are in Florida, there is a task force there that's addressing this. One is, if you could coordinate and identify that task force and ask to help, ask to join up with them, because they're going to be aware of what are the needs in your particular area. And there's a lot of needs. And they're going to have committees like for education or victim services, things of that nature. So if you could find them and say, hey, I'd like to, what's going on with the task force here, and what are the needs in my community here, they're going to give you a good answer. After this is over, and you feel free to reach out to me up here in Gainesville. And if you don't know or can't find the task force there, I'll be happy to locate the one that's there in your region. But for all the viewers, especially here, all of you in Florida, there is a task force in your area. So you could reach out to them and talk to them, and they're going to be a good source of information about what's going on in your particular area. Besides that, there are some great organizations all in Florida that are asking for help, for volunteer help in promoting their efforts to curtail human trafficking. Most of those organizations are victim-centered organizations. So they're working on stabilization and recovery for the victims. So that's a big part of what's going on. But let me say this: wouldn't you rather prevent someone from being victimized than have to spend all these resources and time and energy helping them recover from what happened to them? So that means we need to do a better job on the education side. And as you mentioned, the first question that we had was about what can we do to better educate our youth on this subject? We need to do a hell of a lot more on the front end there to help kids understand what's going on and what the dangers are. by the way, a big part of the problem there is our culture. We promote this lifestyle, we make it sound fun and sexy, and we promote this, through our music and through videos and things like that, that kind of draw kids into this lifestyle. They don't know the reality and the truth of living in that kind of a lifestyle and what the harm and the danger is. So we need to help them understand, if you live this way, if you do these kinds of things, there's a potential for you to be hurt and badly. You could become addicted. You could be victimized. So we need to help them see what those dangers are. And that means be honest with them. Be honest with them. And we can use true life examples. I mean, they're all around us all of the time. We see them all the time on, in the media about the terrible results of a young person getting involved in that kind of a lifestyle. So being honest with our kids, not promoting this. I mean, how in the world could we live in a world where we promote what it means to be a pimp? That they could have their own television show, like that's something glamorized. Like it's how is it that we could have, people who say, hey, I'm a pimp and I've made all this money, and then we actually tout them as being someone important or somebody that we want to, we would want to be like. That's the furthest thing from the truth. Those people are pigs. They're just doing nothing but victimizing and targeting young people and exploiting them. So let's be honest about it. Let's just tell it the way that it is.
Great.
But
thank you, Alex. Great question. I have a question here from Hannah, and I don't know if Hannah, I'm going to just read her question. It's in the Q&A. She says, what would you say are the top 3 red flags that help identify a trafficking victim, survivor, and what are some resources to help them?
So on the victimology, I can tell you what I have seen in the victims in the cases that I have had. So one is, as I said, the vulnerability. If you have a young person that doesn't have a stable, reliable, trustworthy relationship with an adult, that I wouldn't say that's necessarily a sign that they're a victim, but it means that they are a potential victim, that they are vulnerable. If you have a young person that you see in that situation, and then they suddenly withdraw from their friends, or they're on their phone or their laptop or whatever device, constantly communicating with somebody else outside of that friend group, a stranger, or if you were able to determine a male, an adult male. A lot of times these kids, they don't understand that the person that they're talking to is much, much older than they think that they are, that they're portraying themselves. So if you see those kinds of changes taking place, somebody needs to step in and get involved, and they need to have a counselor or someone or an adult, as I said, sit down and talk to that young person and see what is it that's happening. So, and then of course, if you get to the stage where they're a runaway, where they're actually not, running away from home, or they are in, DCF or PSF services, that's what we call our high risk kids. So, and I work a lot with PSF and DCF to identify those kids. But I will tell you this, most of those kids, if they're not involved in trafficking, they're being targeted by a trafficker, absolutely, for certain, because it doesn't take very long for them to identify who those kids are or for word to get out. Because these recruiters, they're everywhere, and they're constant. They're constantly working in our communities. It's happening all over the state. As I said, it's much worse than people understand it to be.
Great question. I have 2 more questions here, one from Jenny, and then Taylor will follow. So go ahead, Jenny. It's all you. Jenny, go ahead.
Sorry, don't know how to unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was wondering, how often are United States sex trafficking cases? How often are the victims not U.S. citizens? I'm curious if they are more vulnerable.
We have had victims who were from other countries, and they are certainly more vulnerable. But by far, the victims are domestic. By far, the victims are just from our local communities. And by far, the victims are U.S. citizens, by far. But there are victims that are, that are, we have had cases involving victims who are minors and young women as well, young adult women that were brought here from other countries. We've had from Russia, from Mexico, South America. We've definitely had victims from those areas, and they are very vulnerable because, not only are they, in a foreign land, a lot of them don't speak English well. They don't have proper documentation for immigration, things of that nature. So they can be exploited for that reason as well.
That's interesting that you say that. Thank you for that great question too, Jenny. In the Virginia Journal of Criminal Law, like at the end, they talk about everything that you talked about tonight in your presentation. And as more gangs now starting to kind of like catch on that this is a great enterprise, and I say great with quotations, right? The article talks about that vulnerable minors from Central America arriving in the United States will now be the new vulnerable population for targeting. And that kind of goes in line with what you just now said, which is, well, wait a second. Yes, that's true, but it is not the overwhelming majority of who the victims actually are. Is that
True.
correct?
That's correct. And so, I mean, I hate to put it in these kind of terms, but let's be real. What is the market looking for? What is the market looking for? The market is looking for younger and younger girls, and they're not looking for girls from South America. They're looking for girls that fit the type of girl that they want to be with. And so we see guys they're saying, this is what I want. This is the kind of girl that I want. And that's what the marketers are going to provide.
Right.
So I'm not saying I want a girl from Russia. I want a girl from Central America. No, I want a girl that looks like the girl that I want. This is probably a girl from their community.
Right. Gotcha. Taylor.
And also I want to
say
I'm
this sorry.
too.
Go ahead, Frank.
I want to point out that especially young gay men or young boys, gay, are very vulnerable, extremely vulnerable because they very often don't have that stable relationship in their life where they can talk to someone, they can discuss these issues that are going on in their lives. And we see these traffickers, focusing in on those kinds of victims because there is a very strong market for young boys as well.
Yeah. And, and Taylor, I'm going to get to you right now. So just hang tight. I gotcha. You talked about something about supply and demand. And so, if we lower demand, then perhaps that might be one answer. Education is another answer. Addiction, we talked about, is another issue and making victims vulnerable. And sex addiction is a whole nother element of this, and so we've seen so many people who their lives have become completely unmanageable and insane as a result of their addiction to sex. And so while education is very key and important, and that's why we do what we do here at the Fischler College of Education School of Criminal Justice, shameless plug, but we also have to look at the mental health aspect as well, because there are folks who really suffer with sex addiction. Do you find that to be true?
Wow, Doc, that is such a great question. And as I said, there's so many aspects to this that I could talk about for very long, but you're touching on a big one. So, I haven't really talked about the market, and as I said, men. So what is it about men that makes them think that it's okay to buy sex? And why are there so many men today that are out there doing that? So I think it's symptomatic of what's going on in our society. And underlying that, I'm not a psychologist, but I have, met and spoken with many of them about this. I've even talked to a lot of the men that are involved in buying sex and questioned about why did you do this? Why do you think it's okay for you to have sex with a 14-year-old girl? And I've listened to the cognitive distortions that they've come up with to overcome the logic that this is the wrong thing to do. And there's so many men who suffer from these distortions in their mind. And a lot of them go to here's the big word, pornography. Pornography is absolutely out of control. I mean, the things that you couldn't see behind the counter, 25 years ago, in 2 clicks, you're watching it on your cell phone, and it is absolutely brutal. I mean, there's child sex, rape sex, there's any kind of sex that you can imagine. There's bestiality, anything that you want, you can get just a couple of clicks on your cell phone today. So it's, what is that doing? It's normalizing it. It's normalizing it for men. And they don't realize that they're getting caught, drawn into this trap in their mind, and there's like a kind of a spiral that takes place in their lives.
Exactly.
So many men I have seen the devastating effects of pornography on them. They're not necessarily going to go out and buy somebody for sex, but the other catastrophic effects on their lives are just, I mean, failed marriages, failed relationships, their impact on them and their children. It's just devastating what's going on there.
Yeah.
And I don't see that backing down right now. I think it's just as bad as it has ever been.
And I think that, you know, as educators and as criminal justice professionals as well, I mean, everybody's got their focus. Everybody's got their laser beam. Okay, you know, as an investigator, I'm going to solve the case. As a prosecutor, I want to prosecute and convict the kid. You know, like those are all of our varying goals. And then, you know, enter mental health professionals, right, who kind of look at this picture of and saying, okay, everyone here is being traumatized in some way, in some shape or form. Even the gang members themselves, and even these organized groups. You know, you have to look at that, as one of my guests, Father Gregory Boyle, would say, who works with gang members, that these are folks who are hurting. And that's why they're hurting others. You know, they're hurting, and this, like you said, it's a very complex issue. And there's a lot of different ways to look at it. Taylor, I'm not going to keep you waiting. Go for it.
Hi.
Taylor, come back. Where are you? Raise your hand again. There you are. My bad. Go ahead. You're good to go. Go.
All right. Thank you. So kind of building off that last topic about how sex is kind of so easily accessible, especially online now, how have sites such as OnlyFans kind of changed the way how people prosecute sex crimes? Because it kind of changes the way people view sex workers now. How like some people think it's a little bit different now. The lines are kind of becoming blurred, and maybe people don't fully realize when they become a victim until it's severely too late. So how does that kind of play into how you prosecute these sort of cases?
Well, you may remember some years ago, Backpage was targeted by law enforcement, I believe, in California, and with DOJ support, and huge case where we went in and actually took down Backpage and some of the owners of the site as well, because of their clear knowledge of the fact that this was all going on their site. So then we have all these. What happened as a result of that was all of the business that was basically being funneled through Backpage just exploded into dozens and dozens of other social advertising websites. So now we've got all these different sites that are basically doing exactly the same thing that Backpage was doing, only it's a lot more explicit. So in that mix, with all of that going on, of course, it's a great resource for law enforcement if if we're trying to identify, who's involved and who the victims are and things of that sort. As I said, it's one of the weaknesses, the vulnerabilities in these organizations. But there are other sites that appear legitimate on their face, and it's difficult often to kind of discern what as you said, there's kind of a blurring line there about when is someone actually being victimized, and how do we make that determination about whether they are voluntarily involved, as in this term, sex worker. Well, sex worker is not that's prostitution. That's what that is. That is prostitution. And that sometimes I get pushback from people saying, hey, you're trying to criminalize people's decisions about what they do with their own body. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. I'm not interested in those cases at all. But what's happening is without this having any kind of regulation or any oversight or whatever, there is no distinction anymore. So, and as I said, a person that enters this as what they think is a sex worker is quickly brought right into this organized crime aspect of this, because otherwise, if they don't do that, they're going to be harmed. So it is quite complicated. And we've had instances where we've had women say, no, I'm not involved with anyone else. This is all me. I'm the only one that's doing that. And only for us to turn, look at their cell phone or the ads and the phone numbers and us to realize that wasn't true at all.
Right.
That wasn't true at all, that they were under the control of someone.
But they're protecting. They have to protect, and they're doing that not only because they're under emotional control, but they're under physical control. Right.
Exactly.
I mean, it's like that's life and death for them, really.
It is life and death. And they are survivors, and they are truly the ultimate chameleon, because we'll bring them in to law enforcement custody. We will interview them, and they'll tell us everything that we want to know. But the minute that they are back out on the street, they're right back with the trafficker, and they are working with them, and they're telling them everything that they told us. And I mean, that's how they survive.
Right.
That is how they literally survive.
And then eventually, what happens, even if they've cooperated, right? And you may have actually addressed this in some way, shape, or form throughout the presentation, but there's an expiration date for them. Is there not?
There is. And it's generally it's terminal.
Right. But at what point does it become not worth having this particular product anymore?
Well, that's up to whoever the trafficker is.
And what do you find in like, can you look at some of those like generalized characteristics? Like what is it? Is it age? Do they age out? Is it, illness? Like what?
We had a woman, she was about 40. And just a couple of months ago, she was found here. She was murdered by her trafficker. She was violently murdered, and it was over a dispute over the amount of money that he believed that she was basically keeping from him. And she was, as I said, I think she was around 40, but her physical condition had deteriorated to the point where she did not look 40 at all. She looked much, much, much older, and she had some severe health problems, but he was still trafficking her, and there was still a market for her. But normally, like, as I showed the other young lady in a couple of my slides in the gang-related sex trafficking, she died from an overdose of it was a fentanyl overdose, and that was provided by her trafficker. So he gave her, I guess, a bad mix, and she just didn't make it.
Right.
So you just can't really predict how it's going to end, but it's not going to end well.
It's not going to end well. Yeah.
I've had a lot of them have black eyes, broken noses, broken arms. They've had chunks of hair pulled out. They have all kinds of different, diseases and illnesses,
right.
addictions, the whole spectrum.
Right.
The whole spectrum.
It's not going to be something like, hey, listen, I'm 20 years and out, NYPD, 20 years lieutenant, and that was it. I'm done, and I'm going to move to Florida. This is not the case for these victims. It's going to end deadly and bad for them.
Yes, and as I mentioned, there are a few. Those are the ones that I call the diamonds. That somehow they got out of this. Most of them found God. They got out. They got with a group. They connected with someone on the outside through a church or some effort like that, and they got they got themselves spiritually connected, and they were able to pull out of it. And I can give names of some of them, and they're, as I said, they speak regularly at seminars and presentations, but all of them somehow found some spiritual help and were able to get out of this. But it's very few, and they will tell you that in all of their dealings with these victims, that most of them don't make it.
Yeah,
most don't make it. I want to share one other aspect of this. I went to a facility where there was a large number of women who were trafficking victims there, And this facility was designed just to help them get out of what, believe it or not, they actually call this the life. It to me, it should be the non-life or the no life, but they call it the life. So when I spoke to those women and I saw the way that they were living, I saw they were in these bunk beds, and on their desks and their dressers, they all had the same thing. And that was pictures of their children. And they all told me, all I want to do is get back with my children. I mean, it broke my heart to see these women suffering and saying, all I want to do is be back with my children. Now, those kids, they had been adopted out, they've been taken away, another family member had them, whatever, but all they wanted to do was be restored with their children. And it was heartbreaking. And I wish everyone could see that. I wish everyone could see that. And I wish our youth could see that, the consequences of where these women end up. Because it's tragic and it's terrible, and it's happening right now.
Right. Hannah, we're going to end this last question with you, if you don't mind. Go.
Hi. So I posted a question in the chat, but you just answered half of it.
Right. That's why I didn't ask. That's why I didn't repeat it. But go ahead. Go ahead.
But I just want to ask about the second half of the question. How often, if ever, do you see victims then becoming the traffickers? Like most of the cases, like you said, do end, unfortunately, in death. There are a couple of survivors, but what about the small percentage that then, in order to survive, start trafficking themselves?
Yes. You're exactly right. That does happen. And it's not uncommon at all. I mean, I had a recent case where we had a young girl that was a trafficking victim. And I would say in her early 20s, and she brought her 14-year-old sister into the sex trafficking as well, and was using her with her trafficker, making money off of her own sister. I mean, isn't it hard to believe, but it really happened. And so how do you treat that person knowing that they're victimizing their own sister, but at the same time are being victimized themselves by their trafficker? These situations get very complicated, and there's some really tough decisions that have to be made in our prosecutorial discretion about where we're going to go and what charges we're going to bring. And it's really tough. And we try to make the right decisions, and we have a counsel and we discuss it. In that case, we did prosecute the girl, and she was convicted for trafficking her own sister. But it's very common for traffickers to have a victim and then manipulate them so far to the point where they're actually using them to control the other victims themselves. And in the prostitution parlance, that's called a bottom bitch. I mean, that's how common it is. It's a girl's referred to as a bottom bitch, and her job is to control all the other women and victims that are being controlled by her trafficker. So it's a very common technique. It is something that we take into account in determining the voluntariness of the involvement of that specific offender / victim, whichever the one we decide that they are. So those are tough questions.
Yeah.
Very tough. And a great question.
Great question, Hannah. Thank you so much. And thank you for your participation throughout this presentation, the webinar. And so look, we usually go about an hour or so, but this has been so phenomenal that we went a little over. And Frank, you don't know this, but my production team knows, and some of the viewers from YouTube know, that we had some trouble in the beginning getting the live stream started. So a lot of people missed my big intro. So I want to do it again as a thank you. Okay. So Frank and I did not know each other. We found each other, and now he said I could call him friend, which is always great to have a federal prosecutor as a friend. But here's the thing: Frank lives in a place where the path of Ian, and lost his power, and was willing to drive a great distance to get internet access. But right before the show, his power was restored, thank God. But I just want to speak to the dedication that Frank has. So Frank not only talks the talk, but walks the walk. And he's a practitioner and an educator. And I just can't tell you, Frank, how much I appreciate you taking the time out, especially, like I said in the intro, that some of you may have missed, especially on YouTube, that, it's easy to just give an excuse. Hey, I lost my power as hurricane. Everybody's watching the hurricane on all of the news channels. But no, he, no matter what, was gonna be on tonight and be my guest. And you have been phenomenal in your understanding, in your knowledge, in your expertise, and in your willingness to share with us and really make a difference. I do think that anybody who's watching any of these, the webinar, either participating live or watching it on YouTube or watching it in the future, because it's archived. And by the way, I'll share the link with you later on so you could share it with whoever you want. But I think that the more people watch this and understand the red flags, understand the nuances, understand the complexities, that that maybe we can make a difference. I mean, I always like to believe that even if we save one life, that's worth it. Then our job's done. So last word, Frank, anything that you want to say to our audience or to the participants in the webinar?
I think it was Alex that asked, what can I do? How can I be involved? And there are so many ways for us to be involved in this subject. I want to appeal to you and I want to plead with you all, please get involved. Please do something, because if we all do something, if we all get involved, we really can have an impact on this. We may not eradicate it, but we can, as Dr. Telesco said, we can save lives. You don't know, but the one person that you talk to, or the one event that you attend, or the little bit of financial contribution that you give to an organization or support that you give, that might save a life. That might save a life. So do it. Get involved.
Awesome. Great. And, Dr. Jennifer Allen, my colleague, just now texted me to please let you know that we have a lot of PhD students, PhD in criminal justice, that are actually writing about sex trafficking, and maybe you can contribute to their research. If you're interested, we'll put you in touch with them or have them be put in touch with you. So thank you again, Frank, for everything. Thank you so much for all of your expertise and sharing, and amazing delivery, by the way. Really interesting, fascinating. I'm getting, my phone is blowing up with people just saying how wonderful this was tonight. So thank you. Thank you again to Alpha Phi Sigma for putting the word out. And thank you for all my Alpha Phi Sigma students and members that are in the webinar. Thank you to our deans, Dr. Durham, Dr. Kushner, Dr. Castro, all of whom support everything that we do here. If you are watching us on YouTube, you see that in the live chat, my production team, Alex Suarez, Michaela Porter, Joey Jozinski, everybody, Shannon Hetzel, they've all been putting some information in the chat about all of our programming. This is the shameless plug part, Frank. Here's our product that we sell. It's all of the great programming that we do at the undergrad level, at the master's, and at the PhD in criminal justice. So that's my shameless plug. Thank you again, Frank. Believe me, we're going to be in touch. And thank you again. Have a good night. And everybody, thank you. Be safe, please. We'll see you soon.
Good night.